Hey there everyone, I'm Errol Barnett at the CBS Broadcast Center in New York. I hope you are enjoying your holiday weekend. President Trump is spending his holiday weekend at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. Sunday morning he attended Easter services alongside wife Melania and his family. But before church, the president tweeted out a threat saying any proposed deal on DACA is now dead. Quote, "No more DACA deal." Here's what the president had to say about his tweet this morning.
It's a very sad thing between two countries. Mexico has got to help us at the border. And a lot of people are coming in because they want to take advantage of DACA. And we're going to have to really see. They had a great chance. The Democrats blew it. They had a great chance. But we'll have to take a look. But Mexico has got to help us at the border. They flow right through Mexico. They send them into the United States. Can't happen that way anymore. Thank you.
He said that after tweeting this. The president wrote, quote, "Border Patrol agents are not allowed to properly do their job at the border because of ridiculous liberal Democrat laws like catch and release. Getting more dangerous caravans coming," he wrote. "Republicans must go to nuclear option to pass tough laws now. No more DACA deal." For more, let's bring in Shawna Thomas in Washington, D.C. She's the D.C. bureau chief for Vice News. Shawna, great to speak with you. What does the president want from Republicans? He's criticizing Mexico, but there is currently no piece of legislation being suggested by the White House. So what is this messaging today really all about?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Number one, with DACA, there isn't a deal for DACA. There hasn't been a deal. Democrats nor Republicans really pushed this when they passed the huge appropriations deal that could have been how you get the leverage to do DACA. So I think this is more about sort of talking to his base a little bit. I think the other thing is in that tweet, he talks about a caravan, and especially in some of the more right press, there's been a lot of stories about these groups of people from Central America who are coming up through Mexico to the United States. And I think he's been seeing some of that coverage. And he, in some ways, wants to, one, play to his base, but two, also try to pressure Mexico to a certain extent. However, one of the things about all of this, between immigration, NAFTA, trade deals, all of that, is also Mexico has some leverage points. And something that we talked about on Face the Nation earlier today, when there were a lot of Central Americans coming in sort of towards the end of Obama's administration, one of the things Mexico sort of helped with was trying to close down their southern border so less people would come up. Mexico knows they have something to do with all of the immigration going on, so they kind of have to Trump is running into a situation where he wants to pressure them. They can pressure him back as well.
That leverage works both ways.
Yeah.
And amid all this bickering, what about DACA recipients themselves? We know that their status is temporarily protected now that all these legal challenges are making their way through the federal system. But what about all of them?
Well, so that's number one. Through the federal system, this is something that, in theory, the Supreme Court is going to end up having to decide. And we'll see what the Supreme Court says. I think one of the things, and we did some of this on Vice News recently, one of the things you have to realize is that DACA recipients who thought that their DACA was going to go away under a certain time frame, there's a lot of people who have fallen out of having their actual, basically, protection because of DACA. Now, they are still here legally. The DHS has said that they are not going to be targeted, but they are now in sort of a weird holding pattern where it takes about 90 days, I believe, for your DACA reassignment to go through. And so they're just kind of waiting and hoping and trying to figure out what they're supposed to do, even while losing their ability to work in the United States.
I want to ask you about staffing changes within the White House. Last week, we watched as President Trump bid adieu to Hope Hicks, making a very purposeful statement in front of the cameras before he flew to Ohio. The Washington Post is saying, well, now he's lost one of his stabilizers, and we're wondering, will the departure of Hope Hicks and other people inside the White House who've been known to able to temper the president, how will that impact his strategy and policy coming from the White House moving forward, do you think?
Well, I think one thing is, yes, Hope was definitely a stabilizer. You have to understand she was at his side during the campaign. She was the one that when you wanted to try to get the President of the United States on your show, you were going through Hope. she knows him, she likes him, he likes her. That's one thing. In terms of some of the other people who are leaving, the National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, people like that, I think one way to sort of also give the president the benefit of the doubt to a certain extent is, you know, what he's starting to realize who he wants around him. And presidents can and do have the ability to get who they want to do what they want them to do. And I think what we're seeing, especially with the VA secretary or former VA secretary Shulkin, is that he had gotten to a point where, one, he couldn't really do his job anymore. There was too much contention there. And two, the president didn't want him there anymore. And so he put someone else in charge of it. Now, the people he is using to replace these people, there's going to be a lot of people out there who have complaints about them. I mean, you know, John Bolton has his share of detractors about the way he goes about things, how he acted when he was in the Bush administration and things like that. But also Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who is the president's medical doctor right now, doesn't have a lot of managerial experience. And the VA is a huge, huge, huge part of the government. I think second only to the Defense Department. And so he's going to take a lot of questions when he gets confirmed or when he comes up for his nomination hearings. But, you know, there is something to be said for the president is starting to assemble the team that maybe he always wanted. And then we have to kind of see what happens from there.
Sunday, the outgoing VA Secretary Shulkin said that he essentially got fired via tweet. So Shulkin got Tillerson. What is the lasting effect of that type of dismissal just within the White House cabinet, White House staff?
I think it makes it hard to know exactly, especially for some of the White House staff, how they should act, how they should roll things out, how they should deal with the President of the United States to a certain extent. I also think that it is worrisome to people on the Hill, especially Democrats who are going to use that for political gain, and we get that. But I think there are also Republicans who worry that firing someone like this makes the country look a little bit unstable. It's unclear sometimes like what the president wants, until he says what he wants or until he tweets what he wants. And it's really hard to just make decisions. And I think that's hard on the White House staff. I think that's hard on Congress. I think we've seen it a lot of times. But it does make the country, especially to outsiders, especially to foreigners, and especially in some ways to our veterans, look like they're not quite sure what is going to happen at any time.
All right, Shawna Thomas, great to chat with you, joining us from Washington.
Thanks for having me.